Welcome back as we take a deep dive, excuse the pun, into a story that has gripped the world right now. And for a number of reasons. We are talking about the OceanGate submersible, which has been all over the news globally, as everyone wondering what happened and what is most importantly going to happen next. Now, left at the mercy of the very deep ocean, about 3 kilometers down when they were last spotted, the submersible is suspected to be almost 4 kilometers below the surface of the ocean. And recent reports state that banging sounds have been detected by a Canadian aircraft, and that's near where the capsule vanished.
That's the scene set for you now, but of course we have to unpack with people who are indeed marine scientists and commercial divers, like Mark Fitzgibbon, as well as Mike Barron, co-founder of the Cape Research and Diver Development, to see if we can unravel the mystery behind what has happened, especially from people who are au fait with this type of field. So, Mike and Mark, welcome.
Good morning.
Morning.
Let's deep dive.
Yeah, literally, this is terrifying. When you look at the background, you would assume that this submersible represents the pinnacle of modern technology, with a few parts bought from like a surf shop on the surface, released from the back of a caravan by the looks of things. It feels like there were so many things that could have possibly gone wrong here. I don't know who wants to weigh in first, but this feels like there were about 9 or 10 warning bells that went off before the sub even went down.
Yeah, well, I think in 2018 or 19, there was actually a letter written to these guys to say, we're not sure about your operations here, your expeditions. It looks a little bit dodgy.
Yeah.
And they have been kind of called out by it. They didn't listen. And apparently, yeah, like you say, some of the equipment and parts used are very unorthodox, to say the least.
Terrifying.
Yeah, it's like a controller. That,
like a PlayStation controller.
Exactly, which is very scaring everybody. If you look at all of those things, I mean, the history behind the safety, a lot of people on social media coming out saying this is why we didn't go, you know, this exact reason. But beyond that, let's take a look and show a bit of empathy. At that depth, I mean, it's got to be crazy for anybody to be in that small minivan-sized submersible. Now, I'm sure as divers you've been at certain depths, but what are they facing condition-wise at the moment at that depth?
So those depths, so we must think about it like this. People don't really go down that deep, not often. And you get to a zone, we call it the twilight zone, which is about 1,000 meters down, where no light can actually pass down there. So if the electronic systems have been compromised, they will be in complete darkness, and the vehicle isn't that big. It's probably as big as this space.
Yes.
So they'll be cramped, they'll be in darkness, and also it's quite cold. So hopefully the electronic systems haven't been compromised, but if they have done, they wouldn't be comfortable at all.
Potentially, what could have gone wrong here? What are we, I mean, surely there must be hypotheses about what is actually transpired, or what is most likely having happened, do you think, right?
Well, apparently they lost communications about 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive. It should be a down and up of about 10 to 11 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think loss of communication obviously happened. That could have been an electrical default. It could have been something even more catastrophic, like a pressure fault or something like that in the actual cavity of the machine, which would have been sort of instant destruction.
Collapse, yeah.
But if it is an electrical issue which has knocked off the comms, and then they've still managed to maintain some kind of control, then they were basically trapped in this little small box for, hopefully they're still there and surviving and waiting. Basically, that's all they can do now. They're kind of stranded.
And just be in that trauma. And you imagine a father and a son being in that space together. It's just, that's where I get to that point, and the emotional conversation just can't go on, yeah.
So let's look at, I'm a positive guy, all right? Best case scenario at the moment. Let's just say there's been some compromise in certain electronics. Let's just say they're at that depth, the pressure is almost unbearable. They sit cross-legged in the submersible apparently as well. Best case scenario, they're rescued, they have to come out. At those depths, I mean, you've been at certain depths as well. I think, Mike, you mentioned 40 meters or so, right, below?
40 meters is pretty much the maximum of a recreational diver limit. So it gives you an idea of how deep these guys are.
You see, so...
The deepest scuba dive is somewhere around 100 or 200 meters, something like that.
So in terms of, let's just say some of them are meditation experts. They've managed to keep calm. You know, what is the best case scenario? Of course, rescued, fine, but in what condition do you think they may be, given the fact that they have, you know, dived at this particular level? You know, what are you expecting to find if you are to find them? That's the big question. Let's try and be positive with this question as well.
Hard to say. Sure, emotional damage, but of course there will be things and protocols that they'll have to do to get them out of the vehicle itself.
Yes.
So they can't just, you know, haul the vehicle out of the water. They're also bolted in there from the outside, so they can't, you know, if they get to the surface, open up a window.
Can't just MacGyver their way out, yeah.
Yeah, they'll have to wait for the technicians and to get the vehicle out properly, because they are also under pressure. They need to, you know, do it properly.
Yes.
Surface
Depressurize.
appropriately. Yeah.
And they're also breathing compressed air as well, which is very dehydrating of the body as well. It's very dry. So I'm sure they've got plenty of water, but if they're starting to run out on water reserves, then they're going to be very dehydrated from the stress as well.
Sure. I mean, as hard as we are trying not to go down that negative rabbit hole in a case like this, I suppose you have to consider all of the very dire consequences of the situation. But if the human spirit, if the human story has taught us anything, there is always hope. We're going to continue chatting to these gents. Thank you so much for opening a window into this world. I know it is difficult to even think about, but we have to, because people are living this experience right now.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to Feel Good Breakfast Show. Expresso here on S3, and we're continuing our conversation around the missing submersible off the coast of Canada that was on a mission to reach the shipwreck of the Titanic, but lost contact with the surface 1 hour and 45 minutes into its descent. Rescue efforts so far have yielded nothing, and the price for a ticket for this particular expedition is costs well over 4 million rand. We've got Mark and Mike, our diving experts, just to give us a little scene set as to what's going on in case you missed it, you know, just to catch you up. Mark, you're mentioning that this thing is sealed from the outside, which means that these people will have to be taken out of this thing with some machinery, so it's not going to be like, oh, we got out, let's climb out of this thing, okay? Another thing is about, you know, where it goes, this submersible. It's going to go visit the Titanic. So I'm thinking about some of the options as to what could have gone wrong, as we've chatted about in part one. What are the chances of this thing getting stuck in the actual Titanic, you know, as they're trying to venture through? Let me show you this hull, or this part of it. The thing getting stuck and now lodged in there.
It's
I mean,
a
can
real
you just imagine?
possibility. As I understand it, the vehicle doesn't have... it's not like a normal submarine when you think of a submarine. It can't kind of propel itself forward. It has some level of motion and can move a little bit, but if it really gets lodged in, say, a piece of the wreckage or under a rock, there's not much it can do. It will need some help from the outside, maybe a submersible rover with some cranes or arms that can maybe dislodge the wreck, or there's even a theory that it could have been snagged in ghost fishing nets. So ghost fishing nets are basically nets that have been lost by fishing trawlers.
And there are a lot out there.
Yeah, and actually a couple of years ago, a Russian submarine actually got entangled in ghost fishing net, and the propellers were all muddled up. They needed to be rescued, and a machine was sent down to cut those nets. So there's a whole bunch of things that could have gone wrong.
I'm glad you mentioned submarine, because in a submarine you blast your way out with torpedoes. You do, you know, it's a different vehicle. A submersible. What are the key differences? And because this kind of highlights just how dangerous the expedition is to start off with.
Yeah, I think the main differences between submarine and submersible are a submarine is an ocean-going vehicle, whereas a submersible is literally kind of almost like an elevator. They launch it from a main mothership or a platform because it can't travel vast distances under strong power. And it literally descends with a little bit of side thrust either way, but it's not a hugely maneuverable piece of equipment. So it's not got the power and the sort of technology that a submarine would have.
It's like a caravan that's been sealed up and dropped off the side of a boat.
That sounds like an elevator to get them down there, look around and come back up again.
Wow, let's get a ticket to that. That's, I mean, the claustrophobia, just thinking about it, is intense. But, you know, you as divers, I'm sure you talked about the worst case scenario, about protocol. if things go wrong, this is what you do. If you're losing oxygen supply, this is what you do. Can you take us through what that's like and possibly what these occupants are doing right now to save themselves?
My friggin' hand is shaking,
but that's the
dude.
thing. So take me through, what was in your training, your worst case scenario protocols?
Well, I remember on my training we did something called a chamber dive, where we get put into a pressurized chamber and we get taken to a depth of about 50 meters so we can feel what, the pressures feel like. But it was a similar condition to the submersible where we get put into kind of like a tube, all packed like little sausages next to each other.
Yeah.
And it gets quite claustrophobic in there. And you can imagine sitting in a very small room for a long time. It gets a bit stuffy and maybe a bit sweaty. And you add anxieties on top of that. It will be a very uncomfortable place to be in. So I can't even imagine what they're going through.
And I'm just thinking about people who have, in the real world, financial wealth to pretty much do anything that they want, to snap their fingers and get whatever reality they need. So that must be playing a different dynamic altogether. What do they need to do here? Do we breathe shallow? Do we try and meditate? How do they focus on preserving their lives in this situation? What are they?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the old cliche of stay calm, and all they've got to do is wait. But you've got to kind of try and breathe as normally as possible, because if you hyperventilate or try and play with your breath, then you're potentially going to maybe use more. Obviously, the panic's going to set in. They are going to panic. But they're just sitting ducks, basically waiting for rescue at the moment. So it's basically a waiting game. But as the oxygen reduces, if the oxygen is going to reduce and run out, it'll be a sort of a slow down kind of thing.
Do we know when that is? Do we have a line in the ocean sand here for when this is going to reach that conclusion?
They did say they have about 96 hours of life support, so it's about 4 days of oxygen, and they left on Sunday.
This is day 4.
So it is day 4. I think
the Coast Guards have said it's something like 10 a.m. It'll be 10 o'clock our time here.
Wow, so we really are on the precipice right now. Oh, gents, stay safe. Please stay safe in absolutely everything you do. Thank you for showing that. I know this is not what your jobs are about, but thank you for showing the dark side of the area that you play in. Is just so unforgiving.
But we're going to remain positive. That's all we can do in your Feel Good Breakfast show. Of course, 10 a.m., that's an hour after this show wraps up. But I'm going to just say we have to keep that one word at the helm, and that is hope. So let's hope for a positive outcome of this particular thing. And, of course, all the updates are available right here on Expresso.